This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Two
Lebanese soldiers were killed last night in the ongoing battles with Fateh al-Islam in Nahr al-Barid refugee camp. According to eyewitnesses, the two sides exchanged gunfire from a close distance after the Lebanese Army managed to control some parts of the refugee camp in its attempt to force them to surrender. The fighting, which has been going on since the 20th of May, has killed 229 people. Joining us from the outskirts of Nahr al-Barid refugee camp, Al-Jazeera's correspondent Salam Khadr. Salam, it appears that the area of the clashes is shrinking, as we have seen yesterday. Eyewitnesses' testimonies that the fighting has moved to close range confirm this.
This is absolutely right. What we are seeing on the ground also proves this. Clashes have almost stopped in the southern and eastern areas of the refugee camp. The Lebanese Army has intensified the shelling in some of the western and northern areas in the refugee camp where we can see the smoke coming out. Today we have made a quick trip to the camp, but we could not videotape what was happening because the Lebanese Army demanded that we leave the area for our safety. We went to the northern entrance of Nahr al-Barid refugee camp and we heard violent clashes between the Lebanese Army and Fateh al-Islam armed members. This is also happening in some areas in the western part of the refugee camp. Abdul Qadir, this news confirms what the Lebanese Army is saying, that they have strategically established their control in several spots in the old areas of the refugee camp, especially near Al-Sahoudi Hill. This enabled them to corner Fateh al-Islam members. According to a Lebanese military source, they now can only move in a small area. However, it seems that this has not stopped Fateh al-Islam from launching more missiles. Today, more than 10 missiles have been launched from inside Nahr al-Barid camp, landing on nearby villages and agricultural areas. A sugar refinery was also severely damaged. The fact that civilian and agricultural areas have been targeted means that the Lebanese Army has not yet succeeded in destroying the missile launching capabilities of Fateh al-Islam. Zakaria Al-Agha, the Secretary General of the Fatah movement in the Gaza Strip, accused Hamas of using brutal practices against Fatah leaders. He said that what Hamas is doing is harsher than what the occupation forces used to do.
In reality, we cannot be silent about what's happening in the Gaza Strip. Houses are being demolished every day. Women and freedom-fighting sisters are being arrested. The occupation forces never did this. We demand that the Hamas movement immediately stop these behaviors and actions because they harm, first and foremost, the Hamas movement.
Gaza appeared calmer, especially with regards to public order. 1 month after the Hamas movement took over Gaza, the fear of death on the streets has retreated. However, Gazans are complaining about human rights violations at their centers, which are being overseen by the Hamas movement's military forces. The specific accusations include the torturing of Fatah activists and members of other factions, to a lesser degree. We went to the Executive Forces Operations Room, which receives complaints from citizens about any violations of public order. People call in their complaints to phone number 109. Citizens say that this number has had a magical effect.
There are no problems here. We feel safe. Anything that happens, we call the Hamas police or the executive forces.
Homes and families are safer. Drugs and street fights have decreased.
The executive forces now number 7,000. At this moment, I can say that there is a general relief among Palestinians. This environment did not exist when there were 60,000 military personnel.
Order and security has been imposed on the Gaza Strip. However, some people are talking about other things. The latest talk in Gaza is about Khalil Abu Dalfa, who was found strangled to death 6 days after he was arrested by forces affiliated with Hamas. The Qassam brigades denied killing him and confirmed that he was arrested on security-related charges.
What happened was that he tried to escape and the metal wire around his neck tightened, so he suffocated. Anyone can investigate this case. It's very clear.
We went to Khan Yunis in the south after we learned about the case of Rafiq Shahwan, who works for the intelligence agency and who was arrested by forces affiliated with Hamas.
They blindfolded me and shackled me. Then they began torturing me. It feels like we are just being accused of belonging to Fateh. So that's it. Anyone from Fateh has to pay a price.
While the
release of Hamas prisoners by Israel seems to strengthen the authority of Mahmoud Abbas, it has indeed deepened the division among the Palestinians. Regardless of the motive behind Olmert's decision, Palestinians don't have much to offer but to welcome the freed captives. Amani Abu Gantash reports from Ramallah.
The family of Abdurrahim Malou, a member of the executive committee for the PLO and the deputy secretary general for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, is counting down the minutes to see him. This news comes after Malou's name appeared on the list of Palestinian prisoners Israel intends to release next Friday.
I received a call from the office of the president. The president told me not to visit my husband Abu Sharif in prison because he'll be released next Friday. I was very happy and overwhelmed with emotions. I even forgot that I was talking with the president.
Until now, I feel as if I were in a coma.
Amidst the joy of those included in the list and the disappointment of those excluded, the fact remains that Israel did not take this course of action for the love of Abu Mazen or Fatah. In addition, it was not meant as a goodwill gesture to strengthen Abbas's authority, as Israel has claimed all along. Israel wants to widen the division among the Palestinians, especially since the vast majority of the pardoned prisoners are from Fatah faction.
Most of the prisoners on the list are from the Fatah faction. This means we are under Fatah's authority as opposed to Palestinian authority. With this, we have allowed the occupation to interfere in Palestinian affairs and help incite one faction against the other.
This deceptive way of dealing will not divide the Palestinians over the prisoner's case because it was unilaterally launched by Israel.
While Palestinians welcomed the release of their prisoners, they firmly believe that the prisoners list was unilaterally launched and it was based on Israeli standards. The names of 11 children, 6 women, and 2 elderly men are among those included in the prisoners list. One would ask what will happen to the more than 10,000 remaining prisoners. What is the point of a goodwill gesture if Israel continues to carry out daily sweeps against the Palestinians? Amani Abu Gantash, Dubai TV, occupied Ramallah.
أماني أبو غنطش تلفزيون دبي رام الله المحتلة.
In today's top story, State Controller Michael Lindenstrauss today issued a blistering report on the handling of the home front in the Second Lebanon War, and there was plenty of blame to go around. IBA's Eli Wargalanter has the story.
Operations in the home front during the war were severely inadequate, read the Lindenstrauss report. The country's leaders invested most of their efforts in the fighting in Lebanon, but not in the home front that was under severe attack since the first day of the war. Prime Minister Olmert, former Defense Minister Amir Peretz, former Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Dan Khalutz, and OC Homefront Command Major General Yitzhak Gershon all failed severely in their decision-making, estimation, and operations in dealing with the home front during the war. These comments are just an overview of 582 pages of detailed and severe criticism across the board over the handling of last summer's war. Declaring that the authorities had displayed, quote, an eclipse of reason, State Controller Michael Lindenstrauss spared no one and no agency. The report blames the captains of the state for investing most of their energies in the fighting and failing to prepare most of the home front for a state of emergency. The controller also found severe failure in communication among the Army, the police, and the home front command on every issue pertaining to the war, including the failure to safeguard the public in the event of a possible rocket strike on a site containing high concentrations of dangerous chemicals. Even to this day, said the report, the Home Front Command has yet to complete the safeguarding of the 458 facilities containing significant amounts of dangerous chemicals. The report also charges that contingency plans prepared for times of emergency were not implemented, indicating that these plans could have provided solutions for a significant part of the problems discovered in the home front during the war. Both the Prime Minister's office and the IDF reacted strongly to the report, with officials in both ministries harshly criticizing the controller's motives and the tone of his report. The Prime Minister's office issued a statement today saying that while the Prime Minister respects and appreciates the professional job done by the State Controller's office, he can't help but feel that this is part of Lindenstrauss's personal vendetta against him. Knesset Speaker Dalia Itzik, who was officially handed the report, said, quote, I don't get the impression that the controller is out to get the Prime Minister. She said that the whole government, of which she was a minister during the war, is responsible for what happened. The Knesset, she said, is grateful to the controller. Eli Wogelanter, IBA News.
Opposition calls for the Prime Minister to resign were quick to follow today's publication of the Lindenstrauss report.
I think that the Prime Minister should have resigned when the first Vinograd report came out. He should resign now with the report of the State Controller.
United Nations World Food Programme today launched an appeal to open key Gaza trade crossings a day before members of the International Quartet, the U.S., the European Union, Russia, and the UN meet in Lisbon to discuss Middle East peace. The World Food Programme released a video showing dire conditions in the coastal area and warned that the economy there could completely collapse within weeks should the border crossings remain closed. According to the organization, poverty and unemployment are rising, and Gaza's agricultural and industrial sectors are struggling as a result of the lack of non-food imports and exports. Speaking from the group's Rome headquarters, Christy Campbell of the World Food Programme said that the only things that were entering Gaza at the moment were food and medicine. And as a result, there was a real problem with the economy of Gaza, which is really grinding to a halt. So what we are seeing was increasing impoverishment, Campbell said.
Life is resuming for the population. The problem is that the only things that are entering Gaza at the moment are food and medicine. And as a result, there's
Suspected Taliban militants ambushed a convoy of Afghan police officers driving through a dangerous section of the country's major highway today, killing 6. In other attacks, suicide bombers hit a police station in the east and a convoy in the capital, claiming at least 3 victims. The ambush came along the Kabul-Kandahar highway, a ribbon of road that connects Afghanistan's 2 major cities and runs through areas controlled by Taliban militants. In the east, insurgents attempted a double suicide bombing at Khost's provincial police station. One bomber blew himself up and killed at least 3 police. A second bomber, who then ran into the police headquarters, was shot and killed. In Kabul, a suicide bomber on foot targeted a convoy of Turkish vehicles on the capital's outskirts, Turkey's foreign ministry and an Afghan police official said. The attacker approached the car but did not open the locked door. He detonated the explosives on his body, and the convoy then came under small arms fire.
Pakistan's President Pervez Musharraf has vowed to attack those responsible for a spate of bombings across the country. At least 120 people have died since the siege of the Red Mosque in the capital Islamabad on the 3rd of July. Musharraf also said he would not impose a state of emergency despite the attacks. The latest occurred in North Waziristan near the town of Miran Shah, where 16 soldiers were killed when fighters detonated a remote control device and then began firing. And the country's capital, Islamabad, is on a heightened state of security as it recovers from a deadly suicide bombing that killed over a dozen people on Tuesday. Sahel Rahman reports.
Over the past couple of weeks, suicide attacks and bomb blasts have become a part of Pakistan's everyday life. Most Pakistanis see the ever-increasing brutality of the attacks on security forces as a direct result of the military assault on the Red Mosque. While at first most of the attacks were limited to the tribal belt, Tuesday's blast in the heart of the capital showed Islamabad residents that they too were not immune to the violence. With the death toll in double figures, this latest attack is a worrying development for local residents.
It is murder of humanity, and it is a great brutality on the part of that suicide bomber. It shouldn't be repeated, or these things should be avoided because these are highly amounting to insecurity to the general public.
No other country is involved. This is all the hallmarks of the Secret Service and the President. Musharraf is using every tactic to strengthen his position. This was no suicide bomber.
I'm just a few meters away from where the explosion occurred on Tuesday evening. Twisted pieces of metal, debris, and there are lots of bloodstains litter the area. This is a very busy part of the capital, F8. It's the home of the legal fraternity. And on any given day, there are thousands of people thronging the streets all looking for legal advice. On Wednesday, as you can see, it's practically a ghost town. As Pakistanis still try to go about their daily business across the country, they're now faced with increased security, checkpoints and identity verification. Despite presidential denials, the opposition is voicing its fear of a state of emergency. Those words that were previously only whispered are now being openly debated. Sahel Rahman, Al Jazeera, Islamabad, Pakistan.
For the second time in less than a week, the United States Army in Iraq announced that an Iraqi detainee has died of his wounds after being beaten by other detainees at one of the prisons in southern Iraq. The Army stated that the detainee was killed in the Bukka detention center, which is administered by the United States Army. The Army added that the incident is under investigation. Another similar incident occurred early this week at the Crowbar military camp near Baghdad International Airport. It is another prison managed by the United States forces in Iraq. A prisoner died there after being beaten by other detainees.
Are these violations or war crimes? There are many cases that have not yet been revealed. The media only touched upon a few cases which are being heard in British and American courts. Investigations and trials were conducted and sentences handed down, but they were all just for show and inconsequential. These photos of American violations of Iraqi prisoners in Abu Ghraib were exposed by the press in 2004. These are the most disgusting and shocking photos which were revealed by the American press. They showed the world the different methods of torture and mistreatment of prisoners which were unprecedented, even under the most tyrannical regimes in the most horrifying prisons in history. Despite all this, not one of the criminals who committed these crimes against the Iraqis were tried in a fair and just court. Amnesty International said that many years after the occupation in Iraq, it tried to change the occupation and Iraqi forces' practices of torture and harsh and inhumane treatment of detainees in the Iraqi and American prisons. Despite evidence of these violations, the American administration and the Iraqi government did not charge anyone with committing war crimes or torture. Just as CBS News exposed what Americans were doing in Abu Ghraib prison, on May 1, 2004, the Daily Mirror published in its website videos showing British soldiers beating Iraqi prisoners in Basra. The Iraqi government also had a part in this series of human rights violations, which continues to take place in Iraq. In November 2005, the U.S. forces discovered nearly 175 detainees being held in miserable health conditions at a detention center affiliated with the Iraqi Ministry of Interior in the Jazeera area. On many occasions, the Iraqi government announced that it would release detainees whose charges could not be proven. However, such releases are rare. There are still 15,000 detainees being held in occupation forces prisons. More than 13,000 others are being held in prisons belonging to the Iraqi Interior Ministry. Iraqis agree that human rights violations in today's Iraq, which is governed by the most brutal dictatorship and the largest police state in the world, have not improved and are probably worse. Day after day, more horror stories are exposed about what Iraqi prisoners and detainees are being subjected to in Iraqi prisons. In the Islamic Republic of Iran, a Tehran hospital received several Iraqi victims who sustained injuries in the latest terrorist attacks in the city of Amerli.
Meanwhile, Iraq's ambassador in Tehran praised the Iranian gesture and urged international organizations and the press to stand against terrorism, which has been targeting the Iraqi people.
A Tehran hospital received dozens of wounded Iraqis who sustained injuries in the terrorist attacks in the city of Amerli. During a visit of the hospital, Iraq's ambassador in Tehran, Mohammad Sheikh, wished the victims a speedy recovery and stressed the importance of taking good care of them. Mr. Ambassador, can you shed more light on this latest gesture by Iran, where some wounded Iraqis received medical treatment?
In the name of God, the most compassionate and most merciful, first of all, I would like to thank the Islamic Republic of Iran for receiving those victims who were injured in the terrorist attacks in the city of Amerli. I visited the victims in the hospital, and thank God, their conditions are now much better than when they were brought in.
In addition, the Iraqi envoy pleaded to the international human rights and World Health organizations to help the victims of violent crimes in Iraq.
Where are the international organizations? Where is Arab nationalism? Where are the freedom fighters? Where are those news satellite channels which claim to convey the truth?
Meanwhile, the victims expressed gratitude towards the Iranian hospital and its medical team and the Iraqi embassy for taking good care of them and looking after their needs. Why do the terrorists target the Iraqi people?
The terrorists want to target and kill Iraqi civilians. They want to wreak havoc in Iraq in order to stop the political process.
The terrorists continue to target the Iraqi people because they want to transform Iraq into a backward nation. They don't want Iraq to develop and move forward.
The terrorists want to harm the Iraqi people. They want to destroy Iraq and displace its people. The terrorists like to prey on Iraqi civilians.
The transfer of terror victims to Iranian hospitals was a goodwill gesture, which will help strengthen the relationship between the peoples of Iraq and Iran. Asim Biqaya, Al-Iraqiya, Tehran.
Asim Biqaya, Al-Iraqiya, Tehran.
إلى الملف الليبي حيث قرر المجلس الأعلى للهيئات القضائية خفض عقوبة.
The Libyan High Judicial Council decided to commute the death sentence of the Bulgarian nurses and the Palestinian doctor to a life sentence. This decision came after the families of the Libyan children infected with the AIDS virus asked the court that the death sentence be commuted. The families had received $1 million for each victim.
It seems that the case of the Bulgarian nurses and the Palestinian doctor accused of injecting more than 420 children with the AIDS virus is about to end after 10 years of struggle between Libya and Bulgaria, which has been backed by the West. The families of the infected children asked that the death sentence be commuted to life in prison after they received $1 million for each infected child. Thus, the death sentence of the Bulgarian nurses and the Palestinian doctor was commuted to a life sentence. This comes after the 460 families who received compensations had signed a document that made it legally possible for the court to commute the death sentence. This was the legal justification that the Libyan High Judicial Council used to deal with this political case. The Gaddafi Development Institution, headed by Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, mediated the agreement with the Libyan families who had originally demanded 10 million euros in compensation for each infected child. According to Islamic law, the families of the victims have the right to demand that the death sentence be commuted after receiving financial compensations. The European Union provided unlimited political and media support to Sofia, thus transforming this humanitarian case into an opportunity to settle political scores between Libya and the West. The European Union welcomed the new agreement, but it expressed reservations that the compensations imply an acknowledgement that the nurses were guilty. Nevertheless, the European Union contributed to a fund allocated to the education of the infected children. The European pressure on Libya coincided with a positive message from Washington that it will appoint the first American ambassador in Tripoli in 25 years. This was viewed as a positive step that will help Libya improve its diplomatic relations with the United States and regain its role in the international community after a long period of isolation. European pressure and American incentives were countered by internal pressure that the Libyan government carry out the death sentence against the Bulgarian nurses and the Palestinian doctor because they were responsible for destroying the future of the Libyan children. This enabled Libya to use the case to address some of its unresolved issues with the West, most importantly the Lockerbie case. This case left negative impacts on Libya's relations with the West since a Libyan officer was found guilty. The Libyan children's case began as a medical case, but it turned political. Had the Bulgarian nurses and the Palestinian doctor been executed, Libya's relations with the West would have returned to square one.
Washington has voiced outrage at Iran's airing of televised statements of two Iranian members of U.S.-based Wilson and Open Society Institutes who were held in detention on charges of harming national security. State Department spokesman John McCormick said on Wednesday that interviews of the detainees Haleh Esfandiari and Kian Tajbakhsh are deemed by Washington as lacking in credit because, as he alleged, they are coerced to speak to the state TV. McCormick, however, admitted that the two were tasked to establish links between the two countries. In a TV program entitled In the Name of Democracy, Esfandiari and Tajbakhsh spoke in details of the U.S. efforts to stage soft coups in other countries under the guise of democracy, human rights, empowering women, and open society.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.